What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome to an edition of J4 Conversation, where today we're going to do something slightly different. It's a feedback show. I'm thinking about adding an element of interviews of folks who I have access to or that I kind of discover along the way from various networks or social media platforms. Very interested in learning where biracial folks who are having conversations and dialoguing among each other, hopefully for positive community uplift and building. And so I want to add something called biraciality, a chance to talk with some folks across the nation over 18. If they're under 18, we certainly would want to involve a parent. But I'm really interested in what are the generational nuances, right? I'm a biracial kid born 1968. 1% of the population identified as biracial. Today it is upwards of 10%, meaning the numbers are exponentially growing. And if you look at the under age of 18, 30 some percent are black white combination, meaning that biracial community is going to continue to grow and largely be the dominant numerical statistic as it relates to the configuration of mixed kids. And so I want to talk to them. I want to learn about their journeys. I want to get a sense if there's some kind of commonality, something unique to the different kind of experiences that folks are having, and just to learn. My channel by large is focused on parenting beautiful black children and beautiful biracial children. And as that number increasingly grows, I think parents, particularly the interracial families, the constructs there, they are having more and more babies. About 10% of the populace of interracial folks are getting married, but newlyweds would suggest continuous growth, and that's about 17% of all newlywed couples are in the interracial space. And so they might want some assistance in, talking through about how to raise their babies to be healthy, grounded, beautiful, contributing, independent citizens as they come of age. And a part of that coming of age process is going to really require some clarity around how they raise their children. If they're interracial, assumingly they're from a monoracial culture, and most parents pull from their experience to raise the children in front of them that they produced. But there will be one unique nuance that two monoracial parents did not have a biracial upcoming of age process. And so there will be nuance. Parenting is parenting for the most part, but there is nuance, particularly in social settings, coming of age process, questions that young, beautiful children might have. Not all children are going to ask identity kinds of questions, particularly that are unique to biracial or multiracial kids. So, the channel is devoted to a parenting component, but also there's an intergenerational shift as more and more interracial couples produce more and more biracial babies. The numbers would just ask different kinds of questions. It'll create more lanes for the question of sort of a distinct identity that's kind of surfacing now in different communities, different kinds of marketing strategies. You're beginning to see more and more visibility of multiracial or mixed appearing people within film, within commercials, within advertisement, right? And so the audience is garnering a certain kind of attention that in my generation it just didn't have. 1% of the populace. And so we had to either isolate ourselves or seek identity or membership in a black monolith. But again, as I've stated a number of times, as the numbers just grow and grow and grow, the community is thought of differently. They're thought of as holistically, maybe of a blackness, depending on who the evaluator is, but certainly something unto itself. And so, I want to add an element of interviewing. I want to add an element of learning and talking directly to folks who are biracial or mixed. It doesn't have to be black, white, although that is my understanding of the world. Born by birth, I'm biracial, French mom, Creole black father, but I'm black identifying. Been black identifying since I was probably 18 years old. I lived in a proverbial gray back then, and it wasn't until college that I immersed myself fully in a black experience, black organizations, black relationships, black study, black research, and living a life intentionally to be a part of being relevant to cultural uplift, which in my era was taught to be the action of culture, right? How do you devote your resources? How do you devote your time? How do you devote your career pathways? Should they be able to line up in a way that's relevant to Black uplift? But I imagine biracial kids are also seeking the action of culture. And now, as they have a groundswell and there's more and more articulation and resources and communications to directly biracial communities, hey, I'd like to learn more about that so I can stay hip and contemporary. All right, shout out to Angry Biracial with the Google eyes. Appreciate you coming through, brother. Mulatto Vanguard, good evening, man. Appreciate that. Back to you, man. Back to you. All right. So this all comes out of the premises of something I created through my own musings. Some of it is research-based, but again, I'm not presenting this as any kind of authoritative figure. But the biracial identity formation that I'm continuing to develop comes out of 9 criteria about, is the question of a distinct biracial identity, does it even make sense? And in terms of some of the data I've looked at, I don't know if it has enough glue just yet, or if it has enough holistic rigidity, something that can confine it, something that can create boundaries by which it can articulate and represent itself at large, at least not yet. But there are significant other things in place that would warrant a question or a conversation, or at least an acknowledgement that this emerging community has more stability, presence, and arguably legitimacy than it did in my era. And so it's part of a distinct designation, a way of being represented in sort of an official capacity. That's largely through the U.S. Census. Is there a tipping point, a critical mass? 10% identify as 2 or more races. When you break that out by different communities, white, Native American, Asian, Black, Hispanic, the numbers get smaller. But as an aggregate, as a whole, 10% is tipping on a critical mass for a new audience. And then what's the likeliness for continuous growth? Well, that's an indication of birth rates, and those are going up. And then also, is the community being studied? Are there articles, empirical research about the community that begins to tell a story unto itself, distinct from a monoracial identity or categorization, and then you can measure it. And once you can measure its progress, you can measure its successes and measure its challenging areas, well, then you can direct action towards it. You can seek solution. And it's in the solution orientation where people gather, galvanize, and then create community. The first step of becoming a culture is to have commonality. You have commonality, common experiences at local, regional, national levels. Do you have common experiences? And the more common experiences you have, that then creates an emerging or burgeoning community. And then once community builds tradition and has historical moments and success moments, it can then shift into culture land. If you look at the trajectory of other cultures, that's kind of the pattern that they face. Common experience resulting in community. Time passes and people begin to build narrative. They begin to tell stories. Heroes and sheroes begin to emerge, and then certain dates and symbols that unify a people, and out of that loosely becomes a culture. So yeah, is it being studied? Is it visible? Is the community visible in sort of traditional platforms, particularly in the popular square? And then is there a sort of a rejection? Is there a rejection by what had been historically the cultural home? If that hits with these other kinds of variables, then increasingly, yeah, people will begin to seek something other. They may not have a direct destination to go to, culturally, metaphorically speaking, but if they feel perpetual rejection by a previous maternal cultural home, they will begin to look elsewhere. And then obviously out of that, the next phase of cultural formation is traditions, celebrations, and those kind of things. So I want to create an interview series called Biraciality. Let me see what we got here. Mulatto Prince, good to see you. What's up, my biracial brothers? All right. Good to see you. All right. So what I want to do is just kind of pull up a document here that I'm kind of working with. And I really would like to get a sense of, what do you all think might be some good questions to ask? What are some good questions to ask people that come in for an interview, with the aim of really focusing on these 4 things? To see if there's consistent emerging themes that the people are talking about, particularly if there's a commonality across generations, or if I interview a person that's in my age set in their 50s, maybe they have one worldview. If I interview a person, and I'm very interested in interviewing folks in their 20s and their 30s, what is their worldview? And common themes will then give me sort of context. It'll give me an understanding categorically where we can then further do research. So not only is J4 Conversations a parenting oriented channel, but also I want to be able to do research. Several of the last couple of months videos have been largely engaging the Pew Research, where they're studying different things upon racial categories, and they're doing quite a bit of work in 2 or more races. And so if you look back 10 years, it might have been harder to find data that extracted that particular birth configuration. But now more and more stories are beginning to emerge, more and more understanding of patterns by groups. And group patterns help us understand sort of, again, what we need to continue to affirm and advance upon, and then things we might want to redress or turn away from, or rethink how we're thinking about particular subject matter. But you have to do that through research. So through these narratives, through these interview series, I hope to understand themes that then influence the direction of research. And then, of course, to my core purpose and function is to understand how biracial kids were raised, what they thought worked well, what they thought was challenging, and then more importantly, if they have, or when they have children, and if they are of some multi-generationally mixed, or at least have this unambiguity to them, how might they raise them to the ultimate goal of their babies feeling healthy, feeling a part of community, having a sense of belonging, which then impacts their sense of self-confidence, a sense of esteem. And these things are critically important for young people who are coming of age, transitioning through puberty into young adulthood, and then eventually grown human being land. And are they then healthy, grounded, solid individuals? But the answer to that question is tied to how they were raised. All right. Let's see what Mulatto Prince is saying. I don't think black people are honest about their stance with biracial people. All right. Can you shift that into maybe shift that, Mulatto Prince, into a question, right? And so how would that be in the form of a question that I could pose to a biracial man or a biracial woman? I don't think black people are honest about their stance with biracial people. Maybe it could be, do you think black people are honest with you about their stance with biracial people? Huh. Okay. So I'm seeking you guys' help today in terms of questions that I might want to think about, muse around, put forward when I'm doing interviews through a series called Biraciality, in which I'm trying to discover themes as it relates to the community, which then shapes research topic areas. And then also child rearing, right? Child rearing. How do you raise beautiful biracial children to be grounded, healthy, nested kinds of individuals? And I think all of this will reveal, is this question of biracial folks creating their own thing, their own culture, is that just related to a narrow group of people, a small group of people, or is it something that has some momentum to it? But I just don't know, right? I just don't know. So in the circles that I'm looking at, I don't see it. I see it in isolated pockets. I certainly see folks in my generation who are just baffled with the question. It's fascinating to me. But maybe through these interviews, I'll discover a sense of, folks are really wanting something, or think the time in the era warrants something distinctive, or they still see themselves as part of the black monoracial base, or maybe they're beginning to see themselves as of black culture, but something slightly different, perhaps a subgroup, one that is minimally declaring an acknowledgement for both the love sources, whether it's black, white, Hispanic, white, Asian, black, whatever the case may be. All right. Ask them how they feel about racial people making their own community and creating their own culture. Okay, yeah. All right. So let me introduce you to some of the questions I have. See if y'all think these are good questions. And then see if there's anything else that you would recommend. And then we'll just wrap this joint up. And then I'll get into the process of identifying some potential interviewees. In fact, if you all are interested in any way being considered for an interview, let me just throw my email up here. All right, that's my email. I'll put that, no, yeah, alonzoaj1968@gmail.com. Would love to meet you, see if there's some interest in being interviewed, or if there's any other projects or questions you want to kind of vibe with or contemplate. I will, that would be a way to communicate it. All right. It only takes a small group of people to make a massive change. I'm networking all over social media platforms. We're building something new that's independent of monoracial jurisdiction. Yeah. So I know where Mulatto stands and some of the other folks here on the page, but I want to test it out. But that is a true statement. It only takes a small group of people to make a massive change. In fact, most change has come from people who have a certain courage manifested through lived experiences, and they sort of go against the grain, but they're not alone, right? They got people in the margins, people sort of in this invisible realm who are supporting them, encouraging them, and they stumble through it. You try to figure out which direction to go, and sometimes there's some tension, in this process that can distract folks. But yeah, it has always been a small percentage of people who have asked grand, big questions and sort of built out the skeleton of that other people then can join in or partake in or take a slice and add to it. But yeah, Mulatto and others we're building something new that is independent of monoracial jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a very interesting word, right? Jurisdiction is implying authority, right? And if any of y'all have seen Mulatto Vanguard's work, he is he's adamant against the gatekeeping dynamic that biracial kids have to go through in order to seek entrance and maintain membership in Black monoracial spaces. And so he's asking a good question, a question for me that was you just had to find a way to figure that out or isolate, right? You had to keep at it. But in our conversations, he's expressing something very interesting, that one cannot perpetually seek membership in something. At some point, you get the message and you make other kinds of choices. All right. I never met a biracial person who genuinely sees themselves as Black. It's always an alternative to why they identify as Black. I never met a biracial person who genuinely sees themselves as Black. It's always an alternative to why they identify as Black. Okay, I don't understand that latter part, but Mulatto Prince, I never met a biracial who genuinely sees themselves as Black. Well, I prior to maybe this venture, I did a show with Gene, who's one of the four, called White Mothers and Their Biracial Black Sons, and it went viral. At least viral for me, had over 34,000 views. And it was in that platform where we were telling our journey into Blackness. And prior to that, I was adamantly, strongly identifying as Black identifying. And much of my life, work, and choices have been made from that framework. However, there are times where, I realize my biracialness, particularly in new Black circles, right? Just to kind of tell a joke right quick. This past weekend, I was in Las Vegas for my sister's, she's a commandress, they call it, for a lodge, like an Elks Lodge. And they opened up the show with the Black National Anthem. And so, I'm there, I'm tuxed out, I got my bow tie, and, everybody's standing up, they got their hats on, they all decked out to the nine, right? And there's different chapters from different parts. And they play the Black National Anthem, and right, so I know the Black National Anthem, so I'm singing. And then I look over to my left, and I see a sister, probably maybe in her 50s or 40s. She looks she's looking in my direction, but I don't know if she's directly looking at me. I mean, there's some distance, but she's looking in my direction, but she's laughing, right? She's laughing. And then I had this moment of self-consciousness. I said, well, I know I'm looking sharp. What's going on, right? And then the only thing that was going on was singing of the Black National Anthem. So in my mind, I said, does this sister think we got this white dude over here singing the Black National Anthem enthusiastically? But, she was probably laughing about something else. But there was this moment of self-consciousness that was rooted in a knowing that I almost always have to navigate predominantly Black spaces anew. Right. So I can be at my university, I can be with my fraternity, I can be in my city, and I've already navigated, I've already established myself, but I do understand the dynamic of finding myself in new Black spaces where the familiarity with me or my family is not there, and so there's this reintroduction that has to occur. And so I definitely see myself of a Black community, but I can respect the question and I can respect the statement because, yeah, if I'm going to be truthful, there are times where I'm sort of re-immersed in navigating Blackness as someone who is obviously highly light skinned. All right, that was funny, at least to me. All right, let's see what we got. Mulatto Vanguard, same here. So our efforts combined will make things happen. Okay, so Mulatto Vanguard and Prince are getting together. Biracial people are Black people's authority. Biracial people are in Black people's authority. That's why we want to free ourselves from in the form of race category. Yeah. It's an interesting word, authority versus community. Authority means hierarchy, or you've lived a life or had experiences where you got flexed on, or maybe you had this awkward internal read or something was just kind of off here, right? Biracial people are in Black people's authority, right? I would say biracial people are in the Black community, right? And we have a part to play, and unless something gets pronounced, announced, or denounced, we don't think about it, right? When I'm moving in Black circles, this morning I participated in something called a Black Excellence Experience Tour, where we had a Zoom call across the nation for people aspiring, young Black students aspiring to come to ASU. And so I was in there representing, a certain message on behalf of the institution and didn't think anything about it, right? So in my worldview, it's very much community. But when you hear words like jurisdiction and authority, that is letting you know that something's going on in the populace, something's going on in physical communities, something's going on in social media communities, something's going on in these YouTube streets where biracial folks are not feeling communal, but they're feeling put upon. And then out of that, you see words like jurisdiction and authority. Heavy. I have firsthand knowledge of this. It's not just conjecture. Speaking about the gatekeeping component. Yep. To genuinely see ourselves as Black, you would have to not know you're mixed at all. Yeah. For some of us, we're so light that sometimes we can fool ourselves. I'm speaking for myself, perhaps. But some folks, might have enough sort of aesthetic or phenotype to where, it blends. But to genuinely see yourself as Black, you would have to not know you were mixed at all. Okay, good point. All right. I'd like to see another conversation with you and the other gentleman, Gene. Yeah. If I could track him down, Mulatto, that brother be so busy. Recently got married, but I need to get him back in here. This is a hierarchy in the Black community. The darker you are, the more pro-Blackness benefits you. Interesting. One of my pathways into Blackness was in a pro-Black kind of space. When you're biracial, you got to find a way to kind of hold your own. And sometimes you can exaggerate it. Sometimes you're navigating imposter syndrome. These are all candid, transparent truths. Sometimes you hold your own, physically. Sometimes you hold your own in your capacity to, hold your own in relationships. Y'all can read between the lines. Sometimes you can hold your own through sports. But I found my membership in Blackness was in most instances, not all, but I could hold my own in terms of historical conversation, right? I just spent a lot of time in my youth reading biographies, thinking about the race question, and I was able to hold my own in most instances, short of historians, right? But in general, age appropriate kind of context and conversations, I found myself being invited to the microphone quite often, and I was often speaking to Black themes. And so even as a light-skinned kid, it was the pro-Blackness pathway that put me into a certain legitimacy within Blackness. All right, let me see. Having to prove yourself, Blackness is already putting you in lower ranks from the gate. All right. Yeah. For me, the proving part, once I did it once, I felt it was done, right? I fortunately did not have this perpetual provenness. And maybe that's in large part because I've been for so long. I've been a part of a community, been a part of a workspace, been a part of communal organizations, and have often been a part of the message delivery of those spaces, to where I never had felt like I had to prove it beyond the initial membership time frame, because I came of age culturally in the place that I still live, and I came of age culturally in the place that I still work at. And I came of age culturally in a community that embraced me. And now, decades later, it's still the community that I'm a part of. I'm a son of the community. And that question was asked once for me, and it has resolved itself. But I also recognize that each of us have unique journeys. Much respect. Much respect. Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming in. I am seeking your input in the way of categories or questions I might want to explore in the interview series I'm calling Biraciality. In fact, let me know if y'all like that name. Do you like that name, Biraciality? Does that even make sense? Does that even make sense to you? Let me know if you like Biraciality. I like that title. Biracial reality. Right, we're gonna get into the realities of beautiful biracial folks. Right, that's the thing. That's the carrot on the stick. The fact that you have to prove your blackness. There's no other two-parent monoracial person has to prove anything, even if they are a bad person. Yeah. Well, young people will have to prove themselves to groups, right? That's a part of youth banter, youth antics, youth hierarchy creation. So all of them will have to prove themselves, but not racially. So you're correct in that regard, Mulatto. Young people, as they go through age dynamics and challenge and bullshit, they're gonna put tests out there for each other. And so there is a proving element that's not unique to the age set that crosses racial lines, but this proving based upon color. Yes, that is a vulnerability for a person who is the minority in a monoracial, right? I don't know if we had predominantly biracial circles of historically we had. I'm sure they put it pretty hard to black monoracial folks, right? There's an element of group or organizational functionality, right? Groups and organizations move in unique, different kind of ways, and they typically cluster by the obvious, and they marginalize those who don't meet that obviousness. And so it can go both ways, but the statistics historically, the minority within the monoracial was the biracial kid. But again, as time goes by and more biracial kids, there's a tipping point. And then you also have intentionality in the part of parents where they're raising their children. And so we're seeing certain communities, certain cities that have high proportionality of mixed kids. There's about 20 cities in the United States where you have the bulk of black folk that live there, right? Illinois, Indiana, Detroit, New York, all Chicago, right? But then the inverse too is you have communities that are low in black monoracial coupling and children, but who are high in mixed communities. Arizona comes to mind, Nevada, Hawaii, right? And so you're seeing from a geographical perspective, folks making intentional choices that are related to their identity and to the identities of their children. Heavy. Biraciality is the reality of being biracial. I like that. Biraciality is the reality of being biracial. That's dope. Mulatto Prince, can I steal that, brother? All right. The proving never stops. Even as an adult in these pro-black spaces, they will still want you to prove your authenticity. I'm over it. It's time to build. Mulatto Vanguard. Good evening, J4 Conversations. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you, Telling Stewart, jury nullification. Thank you for joining me. We're just now, I'm kind of giving you an overview of what my goals are related to a new interview series that I'm launching called Biraciality. So I'm seeking input. Do you guys like that name? The reason I'm doing it is because through the interviews, I'm looking to understand themes. If there's themes across generations, if there's themes across gender, If there's themes in terms of how biracial you are, right? So elements of colorism here, those will shape research areas that I can further dig into the data sets to maybe better understand the community, and ultimately to hear and to offer strategies around how to raise them biracial babies, right? How do you raise them? More and more are being birthed, more and more are being produced. If you look at some of the data in terms of mental wellness, there is some uptick in terms of stress factors upon biracial kids. I want to better understand that and equip this emerging group of interracial marriage folks who are producing these biracial kids to understand what's working for them, and also to maybe put together an inventory of different kind of strategies or complement existing strategies that are out there, because you have two monoracial culturally parents raising a biracial kid and they just don't have that lived experience, and then ultimately to explore the question of a culture. The future is golden. Good evening, J4. Hey, future is golden. I don't know if you've been by before. I truly appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Again, if you all have questions that I should explore, and I'm going to share with you some of the ones I already have that you would like to hear asked and would be curious about the response from the person being interviewed, I'd love to know that. I want to respect the thinking that's out there. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm new to this conversation, and folks have been a part of it perhaps longer than myself in terms of really thinking about biracial solidarity. That's new to me. And so I want to respect your mind and appreciate your input. Mulatto Vanguard, you are right and grown and had to prove my blackness last week. Let me know if y'all want to be interviewed. All right. I had to prove it all because I told someone I'm mixed. Yeah, so I imagine more and more that could be a political statement, right? I'm mixed. However that comes up. It's one thing, they know you're mixed, right? But do they ask the question to give you a chance to sort of distinguish yourself? Or are they asking the question out of clarity just to understand what you are? Or, maybe they find you attractive and they're just looking to break conversation. I don't know, right? But to say I'm mixed, especially with this growing assertion of distinct identity, can become an act of politics, a political act, right? Very interesting. All right, we're chopping up. What's up, future? Hello, Mulatto Prince. All right. Those of us who are parents and grandparents of mulattoes need to share our real parental experiences. Absolutely. Telling Stewart jury nullification. We absolutely do, right? I mean, to some extent, you're going to raise your child the best way you can, and that'll come from your experience, but also how you were parented. Either you will replicate certain things and you'll remove certain things, or if your experiences were problematic, you'll just negate it and find other kinds of models. But as you go from 38 million young people today considered biracial, in terms of the black-white construct, 30-some percent, 36% are black-white compared to over 18, it's 18%, which means more and more babies that are being birthed in the mixed category are black-white. And so we want to make sure that we are raising them mindful of this uniqueness, right? I want to know why black people one-drop us knowing that causes identity issues rather than just being honest with our identity. Mulatto Prince, I might interview some folks who are monoracial, but I'm going to be interviewing biracial folks. I'm going to be interviewing folks who appear biracial, who are biracial, who are willing to come in. I'm not going to put you on the psychiatrist chair. That's not my expertise, nor my style, nor my flavor. It's just going to be sort of neutral questions, and I'm going to give you some examples of them that they can then dig in. But I would imagine many of them might be thinking about these questions for the first time. They may have had some common experiences that you all are articulating, but this reflectiveness, this reflection of their biracialness in a deep kind of way, in a layered kind of way, it might be the first time they're going through this exercise. And hopefully it'll then open up the curiosity, and maybe they'll begin to explore some of these other kinds of communities And maybe they'll land in a different kind of regard for the beauty and complexity that is their mixed heritage. Or if they are Black identifying, maybe it'll be a thinking experiment, and they'll land or continue to land Black back within a Black identification. Or maybe they'll explore something in terms of the biracialness. Particularly, there's one thing to think about oneself, like who am I and what's my identity. But when you produce a child, and if you're a biracial child and you produce a child, there's going to be elements of mix in them. My wife is Black. We have 6 kids. They're biracial presenting, but they're more Black heritage wise than I am. And so it's healthy to think about this dynamic, because we wake up and go to sleep every day in our skin. We wake up and go to sleep every day in realizing that a biracial person has this uniqueness or this small percentage of outward representation, right? And how we deal with that is directly correlated to how we see ourselves in positive ways, problematic ways, neutral ways. But all human beings should lean towards a healthy regard of themselves. And a part of that is self-determination, but a part of that is generational rearing, right? How does a parent raise them? How's grandparents raise them? And how do they get messages of embrace, of connectivity, of belonging from the communities that they grow up in, right? All right. If you're interviewing biracial people, you have to know what type, because there's a type who sees themselves as a biracial and the type who doesn't. Yeah, that's what I'm looking to discover, right? And I'm sure I'm going to learn more language. I've been hearing different vernacular and different vocabulary around the space. It's all very fascinating. Mulatto is a specific American legal definition. Yup. Uncommon Sense with Jose Negron. Good to see you, brother. I think this might be your first time that I've seen you here. Welcome, man. Shout out to Avery, okay. Mulattoes are declared a race in an act declaring what person shall be deemed mulattoes. It's law. Okay, beautiful. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot about this. Being biracial is hard to erase versus pure genes. Okay, powerful. All right, let me share with you some of the questions I'm contemplating. Let me know what y'all think about them. All right. So we're going to start off, of course, appropriately progressive name and anything you want to like to shout out. The other thing too is I want to give people a chance to expose and share and market what they're doing. I'm not a big page, so I don't know if that'll bring any attention, but one part of community building is to give each other opportunities to say what we're doing, to share what we're doing. Mulatto Vanguard has shown my page much love, and I'm sure a few of these subscriptions I have are folks that he sent my way. And so I think we need to reciprocate that, right? So whether it's projects you're working on, I know Telling Stewart Jury Nullification is doing some stuff in the activist space. She's doing some petitions, I believe, perhaps above and beyond. And there's a lot of YouTube things that are going on, and we need to support each other. And so I want the platform or folks who come in to hear the interview not only learn about the person that's being interviewed and sharing, and then whatever sort of complimentary commentary I'm sharing, but also to walk away with a question. Okay, this is what this person is doing. Am I going to support that? Or maybe I'm not. But when we can pose a question that the audience can then grapple with and make a decision around, then it can possibly lend to our collective growth around our collective goal around growth. All right. Uncommon Sense with Jose Negron. My first time here. Welcome, brother. Appreciate you. Magic Mulata, how you doing? Good to see you. All right. Hello, Magic. All right. J4, you got to support and join other lives with biracial people. Time for us to network. Brother, yeah, I'll be right up front. I'm not getting on anything where we're just arguing with each other. I'm not going to do that. But if it's constructive conversation, or if we want to, do some interviews or play around with the 9 criteria, or, share with me kind of what you're doing and different things you want to process, I'd love to better understand and come in and check it out. But I'm not going to be arguing with nobody. I mean, I'll state an opinion on something, but I'm an old man there, Mulatto Prince. But please let me know where opportunities might be. I just subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Negron. Jose and Magic. All right. Hey, Future. We got some hellos going on. Beautiful. Come in my panel one day, J4. I would love that. Hey, Magic, definitely. Let's talk about that. I would love to kind of know the when, the where, and the what. All right. But I appreciate your continuous support of the page and your positive vibes, Magic Malata. Truly appreciate that. All right. Okay. Name and anything you'd like to shout out. What is your racial birth makeup? Okay. This is a chance where you can tell your story about your parents. You know, what was their heritage? What was dad's heritage? What's mom's heritage? And, you know, and then you're the presence of that, right? I'd also love to get a sense of your parents' journey. How did they meet? One thing that stood out from White Mothers and Their Biracial Black Sons piece we did is we talked about how they came together. And they came together in the 60s where interracial marriage was illegal in 17 states. And so, you know, that was a historical moment. But I'd love to understand if you're in your 30s now, I guess your parents were born, whatever the math is, you know, I mean, you were born in the 90s or the 80s, right? And so your parents came together at a time where there was more acceptability of interracial relationships. And so I'd like to kind of understand that a bit. But I'd also like to see, did you kind of grow up in a two-parent home or a single-parent home? And I wonder what those dynamics play. You know, there's if it's a black mom, a white dad, black dad, white mom, whatever the case may be. This will give detail. It'll give sort of nuance and layers to the conversation. All right, so that's the question I want to ask. Mulatto Prince, bluish Gelato doesn't really like to argue. Okay. Wait a minute. Yeah, not everyone argumentative good. Magic Mulata won't argue with you. She's just argue with dummies. I am Latino. Latinos consist of Spanish, African, and the native peoples. Yes, sir. Motherland, motherland. Appreciate you. All right. What is your racial birth makeup? What is your age range, and what part of the world are you from? Right. I wonder if there's a dynamic around biracial identity based upon geography. I was a West Coast kid in a state that was not predominantly black, predominantly white. And so that played itself out, I think, in terms of racial politics or cultural membership. But had I been, you know, raised perhaps where my father was raised, either in Gary, Indiana, all black city, or New Orleans, that maybe my sense of biracialness might have been more distinct. So I'm wondering if geography plays a part of it. And then also the age, right? You know, again, I think there's a generational nuance to here. And it's important that we talk about the generational nuance because I imagine there's the potential for intra-biracial group tension, meaning someone from my generation, just to fast forward back, when I first started seeing in the YouTube streets folks saying biracial people ain't black, I was like, what you talking about, right? I was offended by that. I mean, you know, sort of viscerally, there's some energy to that. But then when I started hearing biracial kids saying we ain't black, I was like, what? And so there's a generational dynamic. And as this conversation continues to evolve and grow and garner more momentum and audience, there's the potential for tension between biracial folks of different generations. And that would be counterproductive. That would not be in any way advantageous, because I think today's younger generation needs older voices. Older voices need to listen to younger generational voices. So wherever this thing lands, it lands as healthy as it possibly can be, because there is this sort of budding internal tension between monoracial black and biracial. How does that work itself through? And I think the passion of young people, the courage of young people, coupled with the gray wisdom of older generations is important to that transition, should it transition. All right, let me go back here. I think Mulatto Vanguard and J4 have collaborated before. We have. You know, Mulatto Vanguard and I first got introduced. He introduced me really to all of this. You know, I got to give kudos where they're deserved. And he locked in on a show called Are Biracial Kids Still Black? And in that, I went over the 9 criteria. The 9 criteria, I sort of shared that with you before. Let me go ahead and do that again. Hope everybody's good. I appreciate y'all's energy coming up in here. But this is the 9 criteria. This is what Mulatto Vanguard, who I think is really looking for solution and problem solving, and he found some value in this about what I thought it would take for the question of biracial culture even to have legitimacy. My words, my thinking, right? And it was about a designation, a critical mass, the growth trajectory. Is the group being studied? Are they visible in the popular square? And are they experiencing a resistance from the historical monoracial cultural home? If you have these things in place, you would have momentum from the community to establish something unto itself. And then when it establishes in itself, it must do something. And typically a way of doing something or a cultural act is to understand your problem areas that comes from research and then to mobilize to rectify or resolve your problem. The more you do that systematically, the more you have wins, opportunities for praise and celebration. And then over time, characters emerge out of that, heroes, significant dates and times emerge. And then all in the back narrative of that, you have the budding of community. Community is the precursor to culture. Commonality is the precursor to community. All right. So we collaborated on critical mass and an overview of this particular document here. I'm signing out now. I need to go make my salat. Yo, all right, beautiful. Assalamu alaikum. Goodbye. Same. It used to hurt me how people tried to disown biracial people from being black when we identified as black our whole lives, but they were right. Yeah. The internal civil war between monoracial black and biracial. I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's some truth in it. We are not black. We biracial. All right. We need a homeland. Oh my goodness. It feels like we have no roots and need to establish somewhere. Yeah. At some point, we'll have to maybe process that out. It's one thing to declare, but in most instances, culture forms by bouncing off of something, a nemesis, an external threat. This here is a pulling away from something that historically had been a home, either by choice or by legal construct or by intra-birth, family units, right? I don't know of any other community, maybe there is, I just am missing it, where they were of a community begrudgingly, reluctantly, or full heart willingly that now is trying to extrapolate itself out. There's nuance there. It's not the traditional cultural formation that you see associated with other things. Typically, they have land, language, a common deity story, a common economic model, and that's gives you the essence of formation of culture. We don't have land, we don't have common language. That was a part of the transatlantic slave involuntary process here. And the black story has been one of resilience. The glue of blackness had been one of perpetual resistance to its oppression. And now we fast forward, we have babies who share half of that or some percentage of that configuration, and they're sort of at least vocally pushing back to the broader society about itself, its sense of self, its sense of belonging, and the numbers are just warranting a louder question, a more pervasive question about independent identity. But it's an extracting cultural immersion, not an organic birth independent to an external threat or nemesis outside of itself. If you follow this thinking down, the threat is itself. I have been blessed to have many biracial, multiracial people on my platform. Beautiful, beautiful. Biracial people should find like-minded biracial people. As we learned in these spaces, we can't talk to everyone who is biracial. Yeah. So all skin folk ain't your kinfolk, all right? So true. This is a whole new culture. Yeah, maybe I should do a show on. Yeah, I need to think about that. All right. Let me respect y'all's time. Go back to some of the other questions. Let me remove this. All right. How do you identify culturally? And has that always been the case? Right? So I would always say I'm a biracial kid, French mama, Creole black dad, but I identify culturally as black, right? And so I'm particularly interested. This is sort of one of the heart questions, one of the premium status questions. And any particular reason or situation that caused that. To me, this will get to where a person is, their life lived and their challenges and things that they found meaningful, memorable moments that were intrinsically tied to their sense of identity and self, right? You know, when did you first realize identity was even a thing, right? Y'all think these are good questions so far? You're so well spoken. I love it. Well, thank you, Milan. Appreciate that. How do you feel when people ask you who you are? I only put this question in because every time I'm looking at a study about, problems mixed kids have, this is always top of the list. How do you feel when people ask you what you are? I don't know if we always assume some nefarious ill intention with the question, but to me, I always saw it as curiosity, right? Human beings want to categorize people. They're conversation starters. They're interested in kind of what your particular configuration is. You have a sense of uniqueness to them, at least in my era. Kids with no melanin but with afros was probably fascinating to people. I never really struggled with this question and don't quite know why we have so much angst with it. So I want to explore that. Oh, Mulatto Princess, check it out. No offense, I think these questions are old. They've been asking this stuff since the 90s. Well, I haven't been aware of it, but this is why I'm putting it out here to y'all. I assign some modern expertise, more nuance that you guys have because you've been in the space perhaps longer and you're dealing with some issues. So would love to get a sense of what questions you all might have. Our answers have been getting ignored. Okay. It's interesting because I'm coming in at a different timeline. You probably have been on this. This is repeated. This is redundant, right? But, we come in at different times, and maybe I'll quickly get to your sentiment as well. But I'm looking to discover. And if you have some more modern, contemporary questions that I could explore or paraphrase under my own flavor and style, would love to do that. So feel free to, you got that email up there. Feel free to send them or put them in here. There's a lot of YouTube videos with the same questions I've seen 10 years old. No doubt. I'm sure this is redundant in some ways. No doubt. But don't discourage me, Mulatto Prince. Don't discourage me. All right. How do you describe your friend circle? I'm interested in understanding that. I had a pretty diverse friend circle in the military environment, but then after high school, it was almost all exclusively black. I'm also, I work with young people in terms of life skills development, athletes in particular. And so how they manage friendship circles is selfishly of interest. What is positive from your experience about being biracial mixed? What is problematic, if anything? Yeah, this is another premium kind of question, a core question. Have you ever felt rejected by either of your cultures, right? A chance to understand individual experiences, see if there's commonality. But yeah, to understand how this generation fares in terms of family nuance, right? So I was born in 1968. Arguably, the parents, one could have been highly racialized, highly opinionated about blackness. But then as you fast forward and the question of racial harmony, unity, openness, acceptance, right? For someone that's 22 years old right now, I wonder if they would articulate racist experience that comes from cousins and uncles and granddads and grandmas, right? I don't know. I'm interested in learning. All right. Fair enough, but then what are the right questions, Prince? The future is golden. That's a great question. I think the questioning point is over. We're more in demand era. Yeah. So perhaps there's an arm of this budding community that wants to be more assertive. I don't think y'all lack for courage, voice, or determination. Beautiful. Beautiful. There will be many lanes to a solidarity or an increased solidarity. Many, many lanes, many approaches, many strategies. If those can be thought of and understood holistically with intergenerational complementary voices, I think the outcome will be better for it. But don't discourage me, Mulatto Prince. There are high demand now within us. Okay. Presenting demands requires organization and people setting aside petty differences. Okay. That is all very true. All right. Recently, there has been a push by some within the biracial community to become its own distinct culture. What are your thoughts on this? That's a premium question. That's a new question, Prince. Thinking ahead a generation, 25 years, in what ways might a biracial mixed person's life be different from yours? Just think about that question on your own, you guys. 25 years. Average person gets married, has a baby around 27, 28. That's roughly a generation. I don't know where you're at, but let's say you're a new parent. Your child is 25 years later in grown human being land. The numbers of biracial kids will be exponentially higher. The number of interracial marriages will be exponentially higher. The visibility of biracial kids will be exponentially higher, right? You have a certain angst that you're contending with right now. What will be the reality of your seed? What will be the reality of your seed? Check out Battle Cat 17, Biracial Not Black, has all the questions and answers, and this video is 13 years old. Okay, I'll check it out. I'm still going to ask my question. All right, come on. Biracial mixed people seem to be more visible in popular culture these days. Why do you think that is? That'll be interesting. If you could go back in time to any part of history, what would it be and why? I want to ask this question because I wonder where you would go. And would it be just personal passion, interest, or would you visit something that is historically tied to your modern identity? Something where, you have these societies. Maybe you want to peek in and understand it, right? I don't know. But it's a fascinating question. I've asked it on a number of occasions in other contexts. How would you describe the state of affairs between monoracial black folks and biracial persons? I bet that question hasn't been asked, Prince, has it? Future is golden. Exactly what we need. Organizations setting aside petty difference. That's where we're at. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna make a note of this. Battle Cat. Truly appreciate y'all coming in. Battle Cat 17. Okay. I like that. All right. And then rounding it out, do you have children or do you plan to have children? And how do or would you raise them in terms of cultural identity? This is a premium crux question. It's something that I'm very interested in. Ultimately, down the road, I might want to create sort of a recommendation, parenting biracial kids, strategies, things to be mindful of, considerations, right? How do you do that when both love sources are present? How do you do that when only one is present? How do you have intergenerational involvement, 3 generations raising, pouring into beautiful children? How do you talk about the beauty of race, the problems of race, the complexity of race in a way that potentially speaks neutrally to both parents who might be historically from communities who were in opposition with one another? Title of the video is Biracial Not Black, damn it. Okay, good. And then finally, as a biracial person, do you think about dating partners, right? Do you think about intentionally who you date, which can have an element of just fun, interaction, social dynamics, hormones, testosterone playing themselves out, or it can be the natural thought process of legacy, of partnership, of relationship, of marriage. And then you're thinking about your children, right? Hey, what kind of children do you want to birth? And you think about that bias. You think about that in correlation to your life lived. And you think about that in how you want to position them for a future success, of which is a motivating factor for parents. All right, let me remove this here. We've been rocking right on the 1 hour. This will be the time for closing questions or to offer questions that you might want me to consider. Again, let me throw this up there. Would love for you all to, if you're interested in an interview, I'll share these questions with you. I'll update it to some extent. I'm not looking to shock, trick, embarrass, gotcha anybody. I'm looking to understand and to be one of several voices who are trying to have conversations around this emerging community of beautiful biracial mixed race kids, trying to intertwine a little bit of research in it, but ultimately a show about parenting. Whether you are currently a parent or inevitably going to become a parent, it's the biggest responsibility that you can have. This biracial thing is unique. It's unique. It's growing, and it's unlike other dynamics where a monoracial couple pulls from their life lived to raise a monoracial child. This is one of the few dynamics where you have a monoracial parent attempting to raise a child that does not share their monoracial status. Many folks are doing it quite well. Perhaps some folks could do it better. This is just one attempt to be relevant to the important conversation around parenting. All right. Date any lady who shares values with me. Jose, yeah. I would, any lady who accepts me as I am and shares some common values. Who you date matters for all racial categories. Dating out is why there's a separation amongst the new offspring. Huh? Yeah. I made, humans are beautiful. Women are beautiful across cultural communities. But when I got serious about how I wanted to live a life beyond just my own immediate sense of self-gratification and satisfaction, I intentionally put myself in social circles that were predominantly Black and knew that I would find my wife out of that, because I wanted to live a life relevant to culture and upliftment and progress. But I also came of age where the question of what are you doing on behalf of the community was dominant. It was in the films, Spike Lee, School Days. It was in the music, Public Enemy. It was in the literature that we were reading. It was in the popular sphere. It was the time of the X-Hat, right? X-Clan, right? The symbols and imagery of Black nationalism. These were the conversations that we were having among each other. These were the speakers that we were bringing in. This is what the music, what we were bopping our heads to. It was what we were watching when we would get enough money together to go to the movies, right? It was always a question of consciousness, pro-Black, as some folks say. And so, as I was a young person, understandably impressionable at the time, a biracial kid trying to find a lane in relevancy, that's the path that I took. So yeah, we love who we love, no doubt. Most people that typically share a common state with their love interest, because you're just in common areas, love who you love, but there is some intentionality, some thought, at least generationally it was in my era, because you knew a partner then lended itself to a family, and a family had a way of being a part of a community. And so it was intentional on my part. Maybe I'll discover in that particular question that it is not as prevalent in my time, although the comments here would suggest there's still premium on that. I don't make the rules, but we can't force white people and Black people to accept the offspring of the ones who date out. Yeah, I might muse here and there on interracial things, but I tend to stay away from the adults, what adults do, and try to anchor it in what adults produce. That's the children. Adults are sentient beings. They make their own choices. Children are born out of those choices, and they have to be raised, right? And I think there's benefit for someone from my generation to pour into that, but it's also an older version of the world. The vocabulary, the sentiment, the rhetoric is changing and evolving. And so young people certainly have to be at the forefront and the center of that, because again, there's nothing more of a premium or a priority for at least my worldview than the kind of children you produce, that you produce them out of love with a partner that you all have vetted each other. You have a commonality, a stick-to-itness with each other, and you produce a child out of planning and not passion. Too many babies born to single-parent homes. 51% in the Black community, 25% across all other cultural communities. That was initially the catalyst for this channel. It wasn't until white mothers and their Black biracial sons blew up that I said, oh, there's interest in the biracial space, so let me explore it. All right, I'm getting ready to wrap. We not aware community-wise, that's why, okay? Mulatto people are judiciously segregated. All right. I'm getting the wrap here. You know, if y'all have found some value in this content, check out some of the other videos. Most of it is data supported, where I'm presenting data and then offering some musing and perspective. I'm looking forward to adding this interview series called Biraciality. It looks like folks at least don't see any problem with the name. Mulatto Prince had a nice saying in here. I want to steal it. Well, I'm gonna find it, but it was something about the realities of being biracial, and so I think it's a catchy name. It speaks to the sentiment. If you all are interested in maybe vetting this out a little bit more, posing some questions, or perhaps more relevant, being interviewed, please send me an email. Obviously, the guests are going to be my responsibility to identify and to vet and to share questions with. But you know, you guys, sometimes you're first-time viewers of the page. Some of you are returners. If you'd like to kind of come in, I'd love to chop with you, and then obviously I'll reach out to some folks who are already in my network. We are getting ready to close. My team is playing at 4:30. I'm going to watch the game. What commonality are white people and Black people producing out of? What commonality are white people and Black people producing out of? Mulatto, forgive me, brother. I don't exactly know what that means. Thank you very much for this stream. I will try to appear more often. Jose, appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you. If there's anything y'all want to shout out, feel free to do it in the chat. I'm going to stay on here just a couple more minutes, folks. Y'all are more than welcome to bounce. Again, check out the channel if there's interest there. I think the biggest question to biracial people is why you don't identify as biracial, and why are you not building the existence of yourself as a whole into society? After all, it is a necessity. Yep. I think the biggest question to biracial people is why don't you identify as biracial, and why are you not building the existence of yourself as a whole into society? I think the biggest question to biracial people. Okay. Yeah. Hey, Bill. All right, beautiful family. I'm gonna keep the hold on. I'm gonna keep the line open, but I want y'all to feel free to head out if you'd like. I like to kind of do what I call after hours, which is there seems to be some energy in the chat. I want to let that kind of organically conclude itself. If you all have channels that you want to shout out, feel free to put them in the chat. Mulatto was omitted from the U.S. Census in 1930. We're still segregated. Yeah. I think the biggest question to biracial people is why don't you identify as biracial? You know, that's interesting, right? I think it's navigating youth culture. In my day, I've said it often that we intentionally silenced our white mothers' voices and lifted up black symbols, right? And a part of that was the time A part of that might have been lack of courage. A part of that might have been peer pressure, whatever the case may be. Again, a small percentage. It wasn't about distinction. It was about inclusion or seeking membership. You know, I had explored white membership as a kid, but I realized I could never fully get into whiteness because anytime someone wanted to outgroup me, they would go to my phenotype, my hair. And I realized that that's a birth identity. I can't change that. But in blackness, there was always a pathway into acceptance for me and my generation. And that was the path that I took. You know, we knew we were biracial, but we navigated space differently, right? There was a public interface. There was a way of being when our white mothers were present. But for the most part, we silenced our black mothers' voices. And in hindsight, that was a problem. The one thing that I like about today's generation is that more and more are rejecting the silencing of their love sources. They're equally exalting mama and or equally exalting daddy. Or there might be a thread who, for whatever reason, maybe dad's not there. And so they're in a blackness and a life lived, or at least the question is posed with some frequency, but they have such an indebted and endearment to their mothers, who in large percentage are white, that to claim a black solidarity exclusively is directly in confrontation with what occurs in their home from their predominant love source. And so marital dynamics are also playing a part in some of these dynamics. Hey, y'all check out Jose's page. My channel is Uncommon Sense with Jose Negron. Check him out. Magic Mulatto says, yep, being singled out feels horrible. Until mulatto is reinstated to the census, we're not valid identity because there's legally no such thing as a biracial. It's legally mulatto. Right. So what telling Stewart jury nullification is representing is something tangible. Right. The U.S. Census has 2 or more races. On the long form, you can break that out, perhaps even on the short term form. But what I think she's proffering here or suggesting here is the articulation of a name that in this case captures black, white. Historically, that is mulatto. I think there's some conversation about what the name ought to be. Telling Stewart is saying, hey, mulatto. But there's action in this. This is a galvanizing point for the community. This can be something that you can organize around, right? This is something that has a destination. You can gather what you need to gather, whatever is the procedure that'll be recognized and listened to by whatever governing authority. You then put this before them, and you can lobby and you can seek input. You can understand what the pathway is, what needs to occur, and you can mobilize, right? This is something tangible. It's a low-hanging fruit in terms of its simplicity, but obviously it's a complex, long, arduous process. But for those in the community who if there is some semblance of folks who are talking about organization, this is a rallying point, something that you can build a success around. And if you're thinking and trying to become something of a more solid unit, something more solid solidarity, you're going to need to have wins. All right. 100%. We love both sides of ourselves, yeah. And that's why I think the biracial question has legitimacy, right? Because it is an advancement of the obvious. That healthy babies raised in love will in turn love those who love them. And they'll love them privately, publicly, and even in their identity politics. They will reject anything that has to involve the denial of one of their love sources. And then collectively, there's a wholeness that comes out of that. Yeah. Yeah, there can be mental angst around this identity thing, right? Certainly. Biraciality is the reality of being biracial. That is dope right there. I like that. So I'm going to assume, Prince, since you put that in there, you're going to let me steal it. I'm writing it down. Y'all can note it here. J4 Conversation steals Mulatto Prince's statement. Biraciality is the reality of being biracial. Boom. All right. Thank you, Mulatto Prince. Appreciate it. Correct. After mulatto is reinstated to census, we can vote for a modernized name. All right. Telling stewards, offering y'all a playbook, y'all. They're saying don't get boggled down in the banter of a name. Get the thing passed. Don't seek consensus on a name just yet. Otherwise, that'll stall you. Just agree to use mulattoes for the governing official to have something to begin with. And then just as names change over time periods, or at least they have for the black community, you know, Talib Kweli said we went from Afro to black to Afro-American to, and right back to, you know, so names change, and you can then do that once something is established. So in her conciseness, in her organization strategy, she's saying minimize framing questions that just keep us perpetually spinning. Find out the process and the procedure to request a redress of the U.S. Census language, get that thing on there, and then take on the next phase. Yes, sir. No stealing. We're here to share amongst each other. Thank you, Mulatto Prince. Mulatto's giving praise to jury notification. All right. All right, beautiful family. I am going to catch my game. If y'all are ASU fans, come on over. We're going to need your cheer and support. But more importantly, be on the lookout for the new interview series called Biraciality. Guests to be announced soon. Join me. Appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. On behalf of J4 Conversations, love, love, love.